Okay, hello, this is the second part of the tutorial videos for week 4, music for film. Here we're going to look at tempo changes, alright? So these tempo changes are handy when you're mapping out your piece of music in advance. It's good to map out your music in relation to the action on the screen, as we've already seen in past weeks, alright? The music you compose should be enhancing the actions that are happening on the screen, so if you can map out key signature changes or tempo changes before you come to composing, or as you're composing, it should enable you to more closely follow the action that's on the screen, alright, by planning your music in advance. So to add a tempo change, we can hold Control and add a tempo change like that by clicking in the tempo ruler. We can choose to snap to the bar, so this will go exactly to 3, and we'll choose to change it to 140 BPM. Alright, so there we've got a tempo change at bar 3. Okay, and this MIDI clip is compressed in to suit the new tempo. Well, we can click and drag these tempo event changes, alright? So notice that everything to the right of the tempo event is altered. So if I move that over to, I'll tell you what, I'll change to grid mode. If I move that over to, that's the second, if I just zoom in a little bit. Actually, what I want to do is change the grid mode. The grid value. I've still got my Ableton Live head on. Alright, so we're in grid mode at the minute. We've changed the grid value. We can click and drag these tempo events. Okay, so notice that everything to the right of the tempo event changes. So if I move this over to bar 3 beat 3, then the information between bar 3 1 and bar 3 beat 1 and bar 3 beat 3 is not altered. So the tempo change doesn't start until this beat, and so the MIDI information doesn't change until after this beat. So a tempo event is tick based, and it adds a specified tempo change at the location. Alright, everything to the right of the tempo event is going to be altered. Now then, slightly different with bar beat markers. Bar beat markers are sample based rather than tick based. We can change tempo events. I'll tell you what, let's just add another one in via the add tempo change button here. Okay, let's add another one to, let's say, bar 4 beat 2. Oh dear, that's getting a bit confused now. Alright, let's just change it to 150. So we've got 2 tempo events in here. Alright, now if we hold command and hit this add tempo change button, we can convert these tempo events to bar beat markers, like so. It also adds an additional one in here because this version of Pro Tools 10.3.7 is a bit buggy, but we can hold Alt and get rid of it. Okay, so now these tempo events have been changed to bar beat markers. So as we've said, a bar beat marker is sample based, it's not tick based, okay? So the differences are that, remember, everything to the right of the tempo event was changing, whereas if we move a bar beat marker like so, all the material in the session is changing, because whereas a tempo event adds a specified change at the insert point, a bar beat marker will calculate the tempo based on neighboring bar beat markers. Now, this start point is always classed as either a bar beat marker or a tempo event based on what you choose in this menu. Alright, so this is a bar beat marker for all intents and purposes. And so when we move this bar beat marker, the tempo changes, okay, and the information, the MIDI information to either side of it is altering, okay, to suit the new tempo. Now then, a bar beat marker will only incur a tempo change if it has another bar beat marker to the right. So we can move this bar beat marker and notice that the tempo at this position is changing because this bar beat marker has a neighboring bar beat marker to the right, alright, but the tempo at this point isn't changing, okay, because this bar beat marker doesn't have another bar beat marker to the right. If it does, alright, so if we press Command I to enter a bar beat marker, and we'll just alter this slightly, like so. If this does have a bar beat marker to the right, then moving it will incur a tempo change at that point. Okay, so slight differences between bar beat markers and tempo events, but very important differences. Remember, bar beat markers sample based, tempo events tick based. So they both, however, will only implement changes on tick based tracks. So if I make this drum track visible and I change this drum track from tick based to sample based, notice that as we move this bar beat marker around, then the piano information changes, but the drum information doesn't, because they only influence tick-based tracks. Let's just prove that by converting these bar beat markers to tempo events. Remember, when you switch between these two, they are converted from one to the other. And let's move this tempo event. Okay, so the information on the piano track is changing, but because it's tick-based, but information on the drum track isn't changing because it's sample-based. Okay, so let's have a look at some different types of tempo changes that we can do. I'm just going to highlight these tempo changes and delete them, and I'm going to change this back to 120 at the start of the session. Okay, so we can have a look at the tempo editor by either pressing this disclosure triangle here next to the tempo ruler, like so. Alright, and you can see the step down there. I thought that I'd changed this to be 120 at bar 1. But maybe I had it on bar 3. I'll just hold out and get rid of that. Okay, so there's the tempo editor in a bit more of a closer view. We can also view it by going to the view window and rulers and down to tempo editor. Okay, we can use the pencil tool to draw in changes. If I change this to freehand, all right, so like so, we can, so this is known as a tempo curve, so I've just drawn that in with freehand. If I go over to the selector tool, if I triple click, it selects a tempo curve. Now Pro Tools has decided that between here and here is one tempo curve, and then between here and here, and between here and here. Okay, so it's separated those tempo curves because there's a bit of space in between here. So that's a little idiosyncrasy of it. So that's a triple click to select a whole tempo curve. If you double click, it'll select just the space in between one point and the next. These are known as handles. Okay, so we can use the grabber tool to edit these handles. I'm in grid mode at the minute, so that's snap into the grid values, but let's just use slip and I'll zoom in. Okay, so we can use the grabber to move these handles around. And if we go, I'll tell you what, I'll go on the multi-tool for now. If we select, I'm going to triple click, if we select all of a tempo curve and then use the trim tool, like so, we can scale the tempo curve like that. Okay, we can also go over, see when that turns on its side diagonally like so, we can impose a bit more of a linear change. All right, so this left hand side position staying the same, okay, but the other one, the position over on the right, is moving. And we can also, if you move to the left of the highlighted region or clip or curve or whatever you want to call it, you can incur a change like so. Alright, if you have nothing selected, so if let's just go back to selector, if you have nothing selected and you use the trim tool, it will scale all of the tempo changes within the entire session. If we go back to the selector tool, we can also copy and paste this tempo change information. So if we just copy that and then we can paste that in there, it'll ask you if you want to adjust the tempo map of the sample based tracks to fit in with the new tempo map. I would always adjust as well, okay, because I've never come across a situation where I would want to do otherwise, although I'm sure that will happen to me eventually. Alright, you can, using the grabber, we can alt and click these handles to get rid of them. Let's just zoom in. Okay, so you get the little eraser on the pencil, so you can erase those if you want. What else can we do? If we choose, I'll tell you what, let's just delete that for now. If we go F10 for the pencil, we can choose a few different shapes. You can use freehand, line, parabolic or S-curve. Alright, there's no triangle, square or random when it comes to drawing tempos in. Notice if I select triangle and I zoom in, that's sort of a grayed out pencil. Alright, so you can use freehand or already shown. You can do a line sort of curve. Parabolic, okay, so you have a parabolic is about the change in rate. So let me just undo that and I'll try and demonstrate a bit of a better. Okay, so with parabolic you have quite a fast change at the start and then a slow rate of change at the end. You can also do the opposite, so you could have a slow rate of change at the start and then a fast change at the end, like so. So that's parabolic is to do with the rate of change. We can also do S-curve, which is sort of like a couple of different parabolic curves put together. Okay, so let's have a fast rate of change at the start and then slow, all right, and then another fast rate of change and then slower, like that. Okay, so different rates of change. So here fast, a slow rate of change, and then another fast rate of change, like that at the end. We also have this control called edit density. At the minute we've been editing on 50 milliseconds, which puts one of these handles in every 50 milliseconds. If I go back to the multi-tool, I'll select all of this and delete. If we change this edit density to be 250 milliseconds, that's going to put less tempo changes or tempo handles in, okay, over the duration. So line like so, right? Okay, so let's see, much less points or handles for you to change and move around, which you can move with the grabber like we said before. If we change that to 50 milliseconds, pencil tool, all right, lots more individual handles. So what's that, 5 times as many or 4 times as many? Must be 5 times as many, okay, so yeah, because 250 compared to 50, so 5 times as many handles or individual changes. So that's edit density. Okay, so that is editing using the pencil tool. If I just select all this and delete again, we can also add some changes using the tempo operations window, all right, which is Alt-2. There we go, Alt-2 and 2 on the numeric keypad. So there's a number of different options. We can cause a constant change. I'll just take advanced off for now. So we can have a constant change between, let's say, bar 3 and tab to go to the next window and bar 5, and we'll have a constant change of 140. Let's apply that. Okay, so the session starts out at 120, which is the default, and then between bar 3 and bar 5, it's a tempo of 140. If I undo that and we choose to preserve tempo after selection, after this selection, so after bar 5, it's going to preserve this initial tempo of 120. So we apply that. Oh dear, what did I forget to do? Undo. I forgot to change the tempo here. Yeah, all right, so we've got 120, and then during the selection, between 3 and 5, 140, and then because we've chosen to preserve the tempo after selection, it changes back to 120. So that's a constant change. A linear change is a gradual rise, so we can go from 120, or I'll tell you what, to make it a bit more interesting, let's go from 130 to 140, all right, and apply. So remember, we've got a lot of different changes here because we decided to go with 50 milliseconds on the edit density. If I undo that and change that to 250 milliseconds, 130, 140, and apply. So we've got a few less handles in there. We chose to preserve the tempo after selection, so remember it goes back to 120 after the linear change, but we've got a linear ramp up, okay, in between bar 3 and bar 5 from 130. Did it go to 120 there? I mustn't have changed that option properly. Let's undo again, and we'll change from 130 to 145 this time. There we go, okay. So up from 130 to 145. Let's have a listen to that, actually. I'll put the click track on. I'll mute all of this piano and drum stuff because it'll probably just sound horrendous. Alright, so I'm wondering if I pressed undo at the same time as pressing play there, because something different happened. However, I think I could still hear, so hopefully you can still hear as well, that it changed when it got to this point. And then gradually slowing down. Alright, so that's a linear change. If we just Alt-2 again, and let's choose a parabolic change. So I'll just delete that for now. I've already said that a parabolic tempo change is to do with the rate of change. So let's go from, again, bar 3 to, let's go a bit further this time for bar 10. We'll decide that it's going to start at 130 and it's going to finish at 160. Okay, but will not preserve tempo after selection this time. With this curvature, with a minus value, you get a very quick rate of change at the start and then a slower rate of change at the end. So hopefully you can see in that curve how that represents a fast rate of change and then a slow rate of change. That's with a minus value. With a plus value, you get the opposite. So a slow rate of change at the start and a fast rate of change at the end. So let's see how that looks. So a slow rate of change here and then a very fast sort of ramp up at the end there. So that's a parabolic curve. An S-curve, as we've already discussed, is sort of two parabolic curves put together. You get a few extra options here. Again, you can do a minus value for here is very fast rate of change and then slow rate of change in the middle and then very fast at the end, and plus value is the opposite of that. So yes, okay, so we get slow rate of change, a very fast rate of change in the middle, and then a slow rate of change at the end. You can also choose in terms of bar and beat location where your midpoint is, and you can also choose your mid tempo. So quite a lot of different options to add some, very detailed tempo changes to your tempo maps. All right, so get stuck into those different tempo changes, experiment with them, and see if you can use them to make the tempo of your piece fit the action on the screen.